as a consequence of pushing yourself and getting stronger, often your body fat levels and your physique would actually coincide with that. So it's kind of like a catch-22. I feel that if you just focus more on your performance and what your body can do rather than how it looks, they're not necessarily separate.
Welcome to the Wits and Weights podcast. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and this twice-a-week podcast is dedicated to helping you achieve physical self-mastery by getting stronger, optimizing your nutrition, and upgrading your body composition. We'll uncover science-backed strategies for movement, metabolism, muscle, and mindset with a skeptical eye on the fitness industry so you can look and feel your absolute best. Let's dive right in. Wits and Weights community, welcome to another episode of the Wits and Weights podcast. Today, I'm stoked to welcome Adrian McDonnell to the show. Adrian is a very experienced online transformation coach. He's a former primary school teacher, and he spent over 4 years in education before following his passion for fitness. He's also the host of the very awesome Lifestyle Lifters Show podcast, which anyone who listens to Wits and Weights is going to love that show. He's got a lot of great guests, some guests we've had in common as well, like Steve Hall and others. So again, go follow the Lifestyle Lifters Show podcast. Adrian has transformed his life through training, just like we are all trying to do. And that inspired him to help others to do the same around the world. In fact, he's visiting right now from Dubai. He's reaching out from Dubai, but he's taught people and helped people in the UK, the US, UAE, where he is now, Canada, Australia. He has something called the McLifestyle coaching method. Love that name. Adrian helps clients transform their bodies, improve performance, build confidence. And he does all the one-on-one online coaching to help clients, get stronger, get toned, get fitter, improve their performance, all of that good stuff. Today, you're going to learn the real reasons you might be skinny, fat, and weak right now, and then what to do to get strong, to feel energized, to nourish your training and body, and build that lean, well-muscled physique that we are going for. Adrian will also share his personal journey with body dysmorphia, so you can come away with some strategies for a healthier, more positive self-image. Adrian, welcome to the show, my man.
Philip, thank you so much for the wonderful intro, and I'm so delighted to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. I actually forgot how we connected, but we connected and we're like, let's swap on our podcast because they're very aligned. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 2 months ago now at this stage, so it's a while in the making. So it's great that we're finally up and running, Philip.
Yeah, exactly. With the time zones and everything, and we wanted to do this back to back.
Yeah, absolutely. Even with the time changes, they're trying to navigate because obviously at the end of the time change in Eastern, I think in the middle of March, whereas in Ireland It is the end of March. So it's like navigating a few things, but anyways, here we are. That's what matters most.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny. You mentioned Ireland, totally off topic, but I recently answered a guest Q&A, a listener Q&A, and I know you just did your own Q&A, and it's been a while since you had done one. And I said, hey, it's always great to hear from people from across the pond. And he messaged me. He's like, actually, I'm in Nova Scotia. I'm Canadian. and there's a very similar accent to
Okay.
Irish. Yeah. It's pretty cool. So I got to remember to put on my no assumptions hat next time when I hear and see people,
You can never be too sure, Philip.
Exactly, man. So let's dive into the topic, and I'm sure people will learn all about you. And again, they should just check out your podcast, and they'll learn about you that way as well.
I appreciate that.
Let's talk about skinny fat. Definitely a term I like to throw around. I just had a cardiologist on the show, and we were talking about how people can be, they can kind of look thin or look skinny, have this, thin body, but really be unhealthy in many ways, and often comes down to, the body composition. So,
sure.
What does it mean to be skinny fat, and why do we care so much about this?
Yeah, fantastic question. Well, skinny fat essentially, Philip, as you might be aware, but maybe your listeners aren't, it's typically when you have a lower than normal amount of muscle mass and a higher than normal amount of body fat. So this would have been me, back in the day when I would have done predominantly cardio-based activity where no one would ever classify me as overweight, yet when I took my top off, I had that small little stubborn layer of body fat and a lower than normal amount of muscle. So some people refer to it as like a mum tum, a dad bod, feeling soft around the middle, but I think we all get the idea.
Yeah, dad bod. That resonates with me, man. I throw around that term all the time because my listeners know I didn't even really lift properly until I was almost 40, right? I'm like 43 now, and in just 2 or 3 years, you can make massive improvements.
Absolutely.
Right? What contributes to skinny fat over time? How does it accelerate? And then, we'll obviously get into what we can do about it.
Yeah, fantastic. So I guess the root cause of being skinny fat, Philip, comes from having a lack of muscle across your entire body. So often people, they might be quote unquote working out rather than training. And an example of this, it would be, first of all, I just preface by saying something is better than nothing. However, with that being said, often it might be a case you could go to like a group spinning class and you could do an hour of cardio. Or it could be a case that you go to a group quote unquote hip class and it's like 45 seconds on, 15 seconds off, and you're doing mountain climbers, you're doing burpees, you're doing box jumps, you're doing all of these fat burning exercises. However, none of these are really contributing to you building some lean muscle, which is the root cause of being skinny fat. So what I would suggest for anyone in this category, we can go on to solutions in a while, will be rather than focusing on, burning calories through cardio, through, quote unquote hip classes, shift and put a big emphasis, which you're speaking about in your podcast as well, Philip, I know, on compound lifts, on strength training, and just in general getting stronger. Because what you want to do is you want to shift your body composition to favor muscle mass more than body fat. You use your diet as a means to, drop body fat, get a bit leaner, tone up, and use your training as a means to build muscle, not to burn calories. So that would kind of be the root cause, I would say, like the wrong type of training, lack of emphasis on strength work. And then we can also go into nutrition as well, but that's like just a brief overview.
Yeah, and there's so many good concepts there, and they're gonna go off into different tangents when we talk about principles. The first one you mentioned was working out versus training, and we can't emphasize that enough.
100%.
Let's expand on that, like just so people know, even besides the cardio, let's say they do go to the gym, they're like, no, but I've been lifting weights for 10 years, or I've been doing CrossFit where I'm like slinging these barbells, AMRAPs. What is the difference between that and what you're talking about with training? Yeah.
I used to work out. I used not to train. I used to go to the gym. I might start out with doing, bicep curls. Then I could do some calf raises. Then you could go on to the pec deck, and then you're walking around. You might do a bit of core work, and no two workouts ever look like the same. But when you think about it with strength training, like it is a skill in itself, Philip. And suppose that you want to become fluent in Spanish. And imagine you practice Spanish Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you do that consistently for, we'll say, 3 to 4 months. Whereas me, I do Spanish on a Monday, I do French on a Wednesday, I do German on a Friday. By the end of the 3 months, who's going to be more fluent and better at Spanish? Strength training is exactly the same. So working out effectively is where you're seeing one thing on YouTube and you do that for day one. You see something else on IG, you do that for day two. You do a fancy circle that you saw an influencer do on day 3, and no two workouts are ever the same. So it doesn't even have to mean that you're doing excess amounts of cardio, but it's more so like you're going in without a structure, without a routine, without a purpose.
Yeah. And how many times have you been on a like a discovery call or something like that where, and I get this with women a lot, and they say, well, do you know such and such workout program on YouTube? They always ask me, and I'm like, I can't keep up with them because there's so many and I have no idea of the quality of it, right?
Yeah. And like, look, I guess the idea is, you said though, the principle, at least people are working out their training. It's better than nothing. But I guess if it's a case that we want, this is a results business too. And if you do want to optimize that, you don't need to sacrifice one to get the other.
Yeah, for sure. And results business. And you mentioned is skill development. It's been a while since I read Atomic Habits, James Clear. Everybody seems to know that now. But I was refreshing through the concepts. And one concept I always love is the compound interest of your habits. Of like in 1 year, if you just improve 1% every day, you're 3,700%. You're like 37 times better, right?
Yeah.
So like
amazing.
you said, yeah. So like you said, even training 3 days a week, doing a progressive program, what does that compound to?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a few different aspects of this too, because you mentioned spinning, cardio, HIIT classes, stuff like that. What do people say? Well, I enjoy that stuff, or I enjoy doing cardio, or I can't work out. I can't just lift weights because, either it's boring or I don't like to be by myself or whatever other reason, they like the group classes.
Interesting. Yeah. Fantastic question. So with that, I don't think it needs to be an either or. Like it doesn't have to be a case that you do weight or cardio. There's a lot to be said. You can do both, but rather like you first of all got to just, as you say on your podcast, Philip, you got to reverse engineer. What's the ultimate goal here? And often people say they use words like they want to shape, they want to tone, they want to get leaner. When you think about it though, what gives your body that shape and that tone? It's having muscle in the absence of body fat. You build muscle by lifting weights, you lose body fat by being in a caloric deficit. So you can use your cardio as a means to get you in that caloric deficit. But if you really want to have that shape and that tone, that is where, some structured and routine strength work will come into play. So if someone, and I think this is important too, as coaches, that I know a lot of, for clients, they always like to finish a workout on the high. and like just feel like they've achieved something. Even if they did a good workout, like almost get that sweat on. So if you do fall into that category and you know what, you like your spinning classes, you like your HIIT workouts, what you could do is add a 5 or 10 minute finisher at the end of your strength workout. And that way you're getting the best of both worlds. You're doing some structured work. You're also, getting your heart rate elevated, which is many benefits to itself. And you're enjoying the feeling, you're enjoying the process. But the big bonus will be, provided you're following a good program, you're also seeing results.
Yeah, that's a practical kind of your lifestyle way to do this. That I love that example, because adding something in that you enjoy, even if it, we always talk about practical versus optimal versus
100%,
this perfect thing, right? And as long as you're prioritizing the thing that's most important, you've got a lot of room and flexibility to kind of fit other things in without overdoing it.
Without overdoing it, exactly.
Yeah, without overdoing it. Yeah, one of the students in my group program, she had a similar concern. She said, I love to do these group classes, but I also know the value of training. So she came up with her own idea to work out at home one day a week, go to the gym, do one lifting session a week, and then the other day is the group class. She's like, I'm just going to do the group class. I said, that's great, because now you're lifting twice a week where you're doing 0 before.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and there's a social element to it as well. Some of our members are exactly the same. They might combine both, and look, at the end of the day, it's getting the best of both worlds, but it's just making sure that you keep the goal at the same time. You're not always program hopping.
For sure. Now, you mentioned building muscle versus losing fat. So when we talk about skinny fat, when you recommend to clients who, let's say they're a noob, right? They're just getting started for the very first time. That's a certain scenario that's maybe a little distinct from an intermediate to advanced trainer who's been doing it a while. So let's do the different scenarios here for a brand new person. And let's say they feel that they have 20 to 30 pounds of weight to lose, fat to lose, which is not uncommon, right? Unless you're in the more obese, kind of metabolically unhealthy range, which is a different population. You often have men who you work with men and women, right? Or just
absolutely,
men?
Men and women, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
And so you have men who are 25% body fat, kind of maybe pushing 30, but they're not massively overweight, but they need to lose some weight to get into a leaner, healthy state. Phase wise, go ahead. Periodization and phase wise, what would you recommend?
The good news is, if you're someone new to the gym and you don't have a whole lot of experience, you can actually optimize both. They are the champagne years you need to make the most of. So what I would do in that situation is, if this individual would say this guy's at 25% body fat, first of all, what we're speaking about, get them lifting weights, get them stronger. That's going to give your body that shape and that tone. And then a caloric deficit of roughly be looking at maybe 20% or so. So let's just say the maintenance calories are 2,500. If we reduce those by 500 to 2,000 a day, optimize your protein intake, all of a sudden now you've gone from probably being underfed and overnourished to properly fueled. You're lifting weights, you have a good structure, you have a high protein diet, and that individual is going to see changes in both muscle mass and reduction in body fat, even though he is in a caloric deficit. The more advanced and, experienced you are, the more nuanced you have to be. But I would say that'll be a good practical application and start point for someone without a whole lot of prior experience. Get your lifting weights, build your program around the fundamental compound lifts, depending on your experience level. High protein diet, micro and nutrient dense foods. And then just making sure that, your caloric amount is in alignment with your body weight and with your goals.
Sure. Yeah. And so they do all these things super easy, right? No, I'm just kidding. It's always simple, but not easy. One day at a time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they've been training for, let's say, a year or two is when you've seen tremendous progress in that first couple of years when you've been doing it. And they got to what they consider lean-ish, right? 15%, maybe 10%. Body fat number doesn't matter as much as your own, how you feel and how you look and all that perform. What would then over year for the next 5-10 years, right? What would be a good amount of time spending muscle versus losing fat? Let's assume they wanted to cycle and they don't want to just sit at maintenance most of the time.
Oh, that's a difficult question. I guess it would depend on the body composition, Philip, because if you're someone who you've more body fat to lose than muscle to gain, oftentimes I find from a confidence perspective, an individual's confidence will go from a 5 to an 8 or a 9 when they start seeing themselves like they've never seen themselves before. So all of a sudden they're, seeing more visibility in their abs, they're seeing more definition. I would almost suggest in that situation, get to 10 to 12 or 10 to 15% body fat for a guy, maybe 20 to 22% for a female, and then focus on doing what we call a lean bulk or a lean gaining phase, where a lot of new research just with Eric Helms, where, the caloric surplus required to gain muscle there was like two studies, and one group was in like an excess of 600 calorie surplus. The other one was like maybe a minimum 5 or 10%. I don't know the exact numbers, but both groups, they essentially gained more or less the same amount of muscle mass. But the group with the higher caloric surplus, significant increase in fat gain on top of that. So what I would do with that individual would be increase their confidence, reduce their body fat, get them to like a lifestyle lean level, what we call. And then that way, then you can focus on, okay, now we've reached goal 8. Let's focus on now adding some lean muscle. And this is like essentially the lifestyle cycle of a lifter. You you spend time cutting body fat to get a bit leaner. You've spent time, building some lean muscle. And then when you get your body fat levels high enough and you want to drop down again, you have a better base to go off. You look that bit better. And it's like just a rinse and repeat cycle. Something similar to that. But again, it depends on the goal. Some people just want to be healthy. They want to be fit. They want to be able to play with their children. They don't want to be, stepping up on stage and measuring every Marcel and gram. And for those individuals, it's just a case of James Clear, like literally dialing in what are the weekly non-negotiables? What are the non-negotiables you're going to accomplish in every single week? And that could be 3 to 4 workouts. It could be 10K steps. It could be, 80-20 nutrient-dense foods. And just being consistent with that. But the more dialed in you are, the more nuanced you have to be, the more you have to like look at the details. So it depends on your goals as well. Because, for instance, I just had a consultation with a guy and he said, like, look, I just want to be, I don't want to be weighing everything out. I don't want this to be taking over my life. So what do you want to do? What are you willing to do? What won't you do? And for some people, you don't need to be like this dialed in and that perfect. And the results being your results are going to take that bit longer. But for someone who wants to take it more seriously, that's when you'll be looking at like, optimizing your training, your macros, your protein and everything.
Cool. Yeah. So I love what you talked about with having non-negotiables, and that's what comes up to me is process oriented goals, right? Like we talk 100%. About goal setting, we talk about outcomes, right? But then there have to be some sort of values that drive that goal. And that's like your why, right? Like you can really dig in on that why, and then either have, like you said, metrics that you're going after, which are still goals, but they're in the short term and they're measurable, maybe daily. And then, process oriented outcomes, which happen constantly, you constantly get the win. So for those listening to you, like that's a great, even just starting right now today, listening to this show, coming up with that first non-negotiable. And it might be sleep. It might be, I'm going to hit the gym, 3 days this week. And so what are you going to do about it? Those listen, like, are you going to schedule that in, put it number 1 on the list, right?
Yeah. And it's just focusing on the person you want to become. Like, see yourself as the person you want to become. And then every act you take, it's either helping or hindering that progress. Doesn't mean you have to be perfect, but just as long as you're moving in the right direction, as long as you're making those changes, like that's the ultimate way of making that lifestyle change.
For sure. Well, yeah, we love that. It's no quick fixes here. It's a lifestyle. So you mentioned, I want to address a couple more scenarios. Let's talk about men first. I've seen the spectrum. You've got the men who want to get super strong. They want to push their PRs. They understand the value of eating and gaining and even just absolute force production from having more mass, even if fat comes along for the ride, knowing they can cut it off later. And they kind of push themselves up into this range of like, let's say a guy who's 5'9", you're good with inches, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
A guy who's 5'9", who wants to push up into that well over 200 pound range in his body weight to kind of push his deadlift and his squat. And then at some point, it's going to have to bring that off. And then you have the guys who just want the 6-pack. And it's like, I don't know if there's an overall blueprint you generally advise to people. I know it depends on your goals, but like to prevent people from going too far in one direction or like making it much harder on themselves later on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's I think it's just navigating the conversation and sometimes like just getting into their psychology and their why of actually what they really want to accomplish. And then from that, like you have to reverse engineer. Okay, so you said you wanted to accomplish this. In order for us to do that, these are some of our weekly or daily non-negotiables we need to incorporate. So for the individual who's 5'9" and over 200 pounds, he can still lift his weight, he can still lift heavy, but it's more so optimizing the nutrition. So he's in a slight calorie deficit. Whereas maybe for the other individual who might be a bit skinny, but quote unquote has a 6-pack, it's just a politer way of saying we might want to gain some mass while, maintaining that 6-pack, but just be open to the fact you might gain some body fat on top of that.
For sure. So you said reverse engineer. I love that. That hits the engineer button for me. But and I love doing that, right? Working from the end and going back, and then you're basically starting to constrain yourself in this envelope of reality that says like, okay, to get here, this is going to happen and these are the trade-offs. And you can't deny that. Like that is reality. And to do something different means you have to change the choices and the paths along the way.
You have to change and it doesn't mean you have to change them all at once though. Like that, and I know that's something you preach as well. Like it could literally be that, you incorporate a new habit every single week. I think it depends though as well, Philip, because some individuals, they work well off I don't like the all or nothing approach, but for some individuals, they're like, I want to be balanced, but God forbid they've been out of balance for, 6-12 months where they actually have been in the opposite direction. So to put them on like maybe a stricter approach at the start might work better. So they see a quick win, they start seeing results. And then you can have like periods of micro imbalance to get macro balance. So you could actually go, and really, rather than dipping your toes, you could go all in for maybe 90 days and then slowly transition out as you start seeing results. Whereas for other people, they might just want to take that slower approach. But the trade-off is you're not going to get, quick wins as frequently, and the results are going to take longer. So no approach is necessarily right or wrong. It's just rather like, what's your goal, what's your vision, and what's really driving you.
Yeah, I love that. Micro balance and macro balance. I like that idea. And even the idea of balance is like, it's become a buzzword where nothing's going to be, this perfect pie that's all sliced up equally.
Exactly.
But you're right. Strictness, we sometimes, like I use it too. I'll say, well, we don't do restrictive diets, but there's a level of strictness that can be helpful, especially when you have a coach or somebody kind of looking over your shoulder to support you if you fall a little bit out of that boundary. So that's a really good message, because fat loss, for example, I have people reaching out all the time about rapid fat loss. And I'm like, well, let's set on the brakes for a bit and just understand what you're trying to accomplish. And then if they're like, I lift, I do this, and I haven't been dieting in a long time, and I've been tracking and I know my maintenance calories, and I'll do it for 3 weeks and I'll use refeeds. I'm like, all right, you know what you're doing. Like that'll work. That's fine.
Yeah, sure.
You can go way beyond that 1% and probably still hold on to your lean mass versus somebody else who has been yo-yo dieting and they don't have their protein and anything. They're like, I want to do rapid fat loss. I'm like, no, you want a quick fix crash diet. That's 100%. Not going to work for you right now.
So the big thing for that individual is they might know how to do the rapid, but they don't know how to transition out of it. And that's unfortunately why so many people rebound after an unsustainable fat loss phase.
Yeah, there you go. For sure. And so speaking of women, I know we weren't speaking of women, but women tend to have the history of more frequent dieting. We just know that for a fact. And oftentimes, women tend to want more fat loss, men tend to want more muscle gain. What is your general advice to most women who come in who have that history of dieting? They still are not happy with their body image and their size. And, they're like, I've just got to lose the weight, right? And they're open to strength training. They're open to using barbells. They're open to the high protein and all that good stuff. Where would you start? Let's say after the initial maintenance phase. Let's assume we go through like a maintenance phase and get everything dialed in first. But
exactly.
I don't want to jump ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, that was literally it. Like, just get to know their history first of all. Like, what's their current nutrition looking like? And for some people, it mightn't be a case you just put them straight into like, are you actually ready to go into a dieting phase? And you have to be like mentally. Sometimes it can be, there's going to be an element to hunger. So mentally, you have to be prepared for that. So I would just, go through the conversation. What's their why again? And assuming that, they haven't been following these restrictive, crazy diets for a while, then you might like go through a restoration phase before going into a fat loss phase. But for some women, it's almost the opposite. It might sound counterintuitive where, like, I had one client, Becky, and she was a vegan and, eating very, very cleanly, training 6 days a week, a lot of cardio, a lot of activity, and 1,100, 1,200 calories. She wasn't losing weight. Now, when someone says that to me, I'm like, okay, you might think you might assume you're consuming 11 or 1,200 calories, not losing weight. But I looked her in my fitness pal, got her to upload photos. Everything was dialed in. So over a 12-week period, we increased her from, I think, maybe 1,100 to 1,800. And her weight went from like maybe 76 down to 69. So like that was just like a restoration phase more so because she'd just been dieting at, relentlessly low calories and over exercising for 2 years. So I really do think it does depend on the individual, whereas someone else, it might be a case that they're eating quote unquote healthy, but they're not losing weight. And they might actually be eating healthy when you look at their food diet. It could be something like porridge. It could be some fruit in the morning. It might be some, brown bread at lunchtime with some soup. But it's like typically like a low protein diet with like lots of high calorie dense food like nuts, like dark chocolate and so on. And if you just literally change the caloric and the type of food that they're eating to favor more higher protein, higher fiber, those individuals, they can actually drop that body fat, and it's more so like their nutrition they need to diet in on. So I do think, Philip, it depends on the individual. Long story short there, and like just what their history is, what their goals are, and what they genuinely would have tried in the past.
Hi, my name is Lisa, and I'd like to give a big shout out to my nutrition coach, Philip. With his coaching, I have lost 17 pounds. He helped me identify the reason that I wanted to lose weight, and it's very simple: longevity. I want to be healthy, active, and independent until the day I die. He introduced me to this wonderful little app called Macro Factor. I got that part of my nutrition figured out. Along with that is the movement part of nutrition. There's a plan to it, and he really helped me with that. The other thing he helped me with was knowing that I need to get a lot of steps in. So the more steps you have, the higher your expenditure is, and the easier it is to lose weight. When it's presented to you like he presents it, it makes even more sense. And the other thing that he had was a hunger guide, and that really helped me. So thank you, Philip.
It always depends on the individual for sure. And these examples you talk about where someone has been quote unquote dieting at quote unquote 1100 calories are rampant. Like these stories are super, super common. And you're right. The first question is, are you really consuming that? And it's not that we're trying to gaslight people. We're trying to recognize that there's a gap in information and there's some extra knowledge we can gather about ourselves and our bodies. And that's very empowering for men and women to know, oh, you know what? I've actually been consuming 2,000 calories. Now Adrian has me consuming 1,800, but a known 1,800. And that's why I'm kind of losing maybe, right? Or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
And doing it in a nourishing way. So let's talk about nourishment. You talked about overfed, but undernourished before.
Absolutely.
So we're trying to flip that around to properly fed, but nourished, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So like really it comes down to some of our principles of Mac Lifestyle Fitness. So first of all, a plant and a protein at every single meal. So and of all the meals, men and women, we often find that breakfast tends to be the most challenging one that an individual gets their protein in, because it's often like just they're on the go. They might have some oatmeal or some porridge. It could be like cereal and stuff. And like you have to really be specific and dial in with your protein at breakfast. But for any individual, what I would recommend, assuming that you're not overweight, take your body weight and multiply that by 2. And that'll be a good target for you in terms of your daily protein intake. So if you're an 80 kilogram individual male, that'll be roughly 160 grams. If you're 60 kilogram female, that'll be roughly 120 grams. And once you know that number, just ask yourself, how many meals a day are you typically having? If you're having 4 meals a day, divide that number by 4, and that's roughly the amount of protein you want to have per meal. So for a male, 160 grams a day divided by 4 meals, very, very simple, 40 grams of protein. Now, all of a sudden, how do I get 40 grams of protein in? Well, that could be, 300 grams of Greek yogurt. It could be 2 scoops of protein. It could be 2 eggs and 5 egg whites. It could be 150 grams of chicken, 150 grams of steak. It's actually not that hard once, as you say, Philip, you reverse engineer. So that'll be the first principle: plant or a protein at every meal. The next one being a plant. So plants, either a fruit or a vegetable. So with your breakfast, it could be some fruit, blueberries. With the porridge for lunch, it could be some spinach, some salad, some veggies, etc. But the reason these things are important is because protein and fiber, so protein and a plant, they will help keep you fuller for longer. And the ultimate goal of dropping body fat is you should aim to eat as much food as possible while staying within your caloric limit. And a good way of doing that is high protein, high fiber, and also drinking lots of water.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I mean, we preach exactly the same thing. And just to convert the numbers for Imperial, right? You mentioned 2 grams per kilogram. That's like 1 gram, or it's roughly a little bit less than 1 gram per pound. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no worries. There was a study, I think in the latest Body by Science. I don't know if you subscribe to that, Dr. Bill Campbell.
Oh yeah, very good.
Yeah. No, I was in that. I was in that an issue in May. Just to toot my own horn, I was in there talking about abs and something and carbs. But anyway, the recent issue, he reviewed a study on protein that showed that 2 populations consuming the same calories, one that had low protein, one had high protein, their body composition improved even in the lack of strength training, which is incredible. It just shows you the value of having that high protein in your diet.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah. I can look it up for you and see what the study is. Because we're a big fan of using evidence. And like you mentioned earlier about gaining muscle and not gaining too much fat, I think you were talking about the Helms study.
Absolutely. It was the Helms study. Exactly. Yeah.
And maybe if I can remember, I could throw those in here.
Yeah.
So I don't know what else there is with skinny fat other than, get started today, like training and building muscle, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like literally, if there was a 3-step process, I would say, lift weights, focus on the compound list, which is what you're always speaking about. Not saying to cut out or, to remove the cardio, but rather I'd say spend double the amount of time lifting weights you do doing cardio. So if you do 2 hours or 1 hour of cardio a week, try to do 2 hours of weights at least. And then just finally nourish your body properly by having the high protein, the high fiber, nutrient dense foods, and just making sure you're consuming the right amount for you and for your specific goals.
Beautiful. And I'm sure you found that comes up almost every podcast episode you've ever done to some extent. and we have to revisit it over and over because I think it's good for people to know.
Well, repetition is the mother, mother of everything else. Sometimes though we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught, Philip.
I know. We remind ourselves as well.
Absolutely.
So let's switch into a little more psychology and get into the body dysmorphia topic. I think that's a really important one because when we talk about skinny fat, or we even use labels for shapes of bodies, or we talk about body composition and everything else, there are a lot of benefits beyond physique, right? We could talk about all the benefits of having muscle mass to the day you die. You want to be lifting like I always say, I want to die doing a deadlift when I'm like 99 or whatever. But you've had a history with, body image challenges. So tell us about your experience. I'll just leave it open. Tell us your story and then how it shaped your approach to where you got to today.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not really sure when it started. I guess when you initially start lifting weights and you see yourself look like you've never seen yourself before, I would have almost tied a lot of my identity to my body fat percentage. So when I was looking leaner, I'd almost I'd obviously be happier within, but then if I gained a small bit of body fat or you had a bit of fun every now and then, you went for, takeout with your family, or you just had some drinks at the weekend and then you woke up the following morning, you're feeling somewhat bloated. It's almost like your own worst enemy is living between your two ears. Like you're feeling guilty, you're feeling ashamed, like, what are you doing? And I fell into this rut where I would nearly have to exercise to undo, quote unquote, undo the damage of, the night out involving alcohol or maybe the odd takeaway. And I would say then that got to its height nearly last year, not necessarily the alcohol side, but definitely the body dysmorphia side, because I competed for the first time in bodybuilding. And it probably wasn't something that I was fully prepared for. I didn't even intend on competing last year, but I just did a mini cut and then that transition to, what if? And then all of a sudden I hear there's a natural bodybuilding competition on maybe 7 or 8 weeks from now, and I was already in decent shape after a photo shoot. And I got my body fat levels to, single digits and, basically peeled to the bone. But the aftermath then, when you see yourself looking like that and you tie a lot of your identity to who you are, the type of person you are, to having that low body fat percentage, when I started gaining a small bit of body fat, I did find it hard to accept. And this came also, which again, I don't think I'll compete again, but just an obsession with food. Your day is literally thinking about your next meal. And that was just something I found quite difficult. So thankfully last year I was working with a business mentor, but he also competed himself. And I just spoke to him about that. And he said, that was some of the challenges that he himself also went through. And one thing that stuck with me that he told me was shift your focus away from how you look, and rather than setting physique based goals like I want to be X weight or X body fat percentage, yes, that's all good, but why not focus to a performance based goal? So actually just last week I hit one of my big performance based goals that I would have set this year but had in mind last year: run a sub 20-minute 5-kilometer run. And just when you shift your focus away from how you look to how you perform, you're getting out of your own head, you're focusing on getting stronger in the gym, and that does require that you're fueling your body properly rather than just restricting yourself. And to be honest, man, ever since I've done that and just had that mindset, particularly the last couple of months, mentally I'm feeling much better. Physically, sure, I have a bit more body fat, but I feel like I'm able to perform better. I feel much, much stronger and just in a better headspace overall. So what I would say to any
man, I love that. Yeah.
individual in this, anyone with these, there's more to you than your image. There's more to you than your body weight. There's more to you than your body fat. And just focus on what you can actually do with the right approach, with the right mindset. And food is fuel at the end of the day. It's actually needed to survive. And yes, it is nice to have a lean and aesthetic look with your body, but don't get to a point where it's almost like it's over consuming your life and you're actually not able to, get some element of enjoyment from it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for sharing that. And it sounds like, it was recent. And even though, you're a highly accomplished, established coach, we're not perfect. We're human beings, right? We all struggle with things.
Peak for sure. Yeah. Last year is at its peak. And I'm not saying it's ever gone because, some days it still does come back, but it's just your self-talk, it's your mindset. And I'm definitely in a much, much better position even now to speak about it than I would have been last year. After the bodybuilding, I don't know, it was a lack of energy, it was a lack of drive, a lack of motivation. It's hard because you're almost living in this bubble where every day is you can nearly predict how the day is going to go before it even starts. It's your training, it's your steps, it's your cardio, it's your routine, it's day in, it's day out. And I just found it hard then that when you're in this bubble and when you're just like so dialed in, to suddenly transition out of that. You hear a lot of athletes who they get some element of depression, or a year, a lot of CEOs or business owners, they sell their multi-million or billion-dollar business, but then they tie so much their identity into that thing that they don't even think about the aftermath. And while I'm not the same in the sense of the bodybuilding, but it was more so the routine and something that I was married to, that when I had to get out of that, and then all of a sudden you see yourself gaining some weight, it can be sometimes hard to take if you don't prepare yourself mentally for it. But with that being said, I'm so grateful to have gone through it, because now like I've become a much, much better coach, and I can relate to some of my clients who have some of these similar challenges. I had a conversation with a guy recently, something similar, or even like just anyone in a fat loss phase. They're like, yeah, okay, you're feeling hungry, you're in a calorie deficit, that's a good thing. It's a sign your metabolism is adapting, you're dropping weight, you're dropping body fat, and it's a sign that it's working. But look, it was an experience, man, and it's been great to go through, and it's also great that, you know, I'm at least on the other side of it, or moving in the right direction, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of lessons there for folks who, including the idea that think twice before you go after an extreme goal of any kind, whether it's athletic or otherwise. Like you said, even in business, where that actually, when we talked about balance before, that is something that can shift your balance to where you're, you know, consumed or completely focused on this. And it doesn't have to be like you said, there are some positives. I'm sure you learned a lot through that process. I remember talking to Steve Hall, and I know you talked to him as well. Like, he's a big fan of making yourself more resilient and kind of gritty through these kinds of things, but not letting them become your life forever, you know.
For sure. Yeah. And just not wrapping all of your identity into one thing.
Your identity.
Yeah.
For sure. The physique-based goals instead of performance-based goals. It's funny you mentioned all that about body fat. I just did a training like yesterday in my community about body fat, because people are always asking like about body fat percentage and how to measure it and everything. The overall theme was like, it's just a little number. It's not very accurate, but we can use it to tell trend, but let's not use that as our goal.
Sure.
Like, let's not use body fat as our goal. Let's do the more deeper goals. You're emphasizing that.
But the ironic thing is, Philip, that often when you focus on the performance-based goals, as a consequence of pushing yourself and getting stronger, often your body fat levels and your physique would actually coincide with that. So it's kind of like a catch-22. I feel that if you just focus more on your performance and what your body can do rather than how it looks, they're not necessarily separate.
For sure. And I think that could be very helpful for folks who want to build muscle and are afraid of gaining weight at all, like on purpose. Because I remember the first time I did that and I gained weight on purpose, it was liberating at the same time, but very scary, right? Because I am drinking whole milk or pounding down all these calories. And I'm actually gaining weight on purpose, but doing it in a controlled way along with the training, which I had never done before.
Yeah.
So when you say focus on everything but the scale weight, other than a tool to kind of measure retroactively that you've got the right calories and things, it can be very liberating, because then you're like, oh, my lifts are going up, my energy's going up, I'm getting more sleep, my hormone markers are better. Like, all those things can, especially when you're gaining, right? Because then everything is kind of improving.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it's the life cycle of a lifter. What we were saying at the start, Philip.
the improvement season. You want to be living more in the improvement season than the cutting season, I would hope to.
Absolutely. Yeah, over the long term. And it's something you see a lot of elite athletes over here in Dubai, and a lot of them are saying, like, the ratio of time they spend in a fat loss versus an improvement phase is what you're saying. It's like minimum for some people, it's like 6-1 in terms of years. For others people, it might be like a 3-1. But really, there's a lot to be said of just building a good solid foundation and base by packing on muscle. And then once you have that base, that's when you can focus on like trimming it down, what we were speaking on at the start.
Yeah. No. What about let's talk. Let's go back to women, because I tend to see body dysmorphia more common in women, but obviously with men who've gone through something like you did, and I think there's a big influence because of social media. So let's get into those thorny waters of the fitness industry, social media, how they contribute to this, how we should maybe put our critical thinking hats on, even like men and women listening to this and looking at their content and their feed. Like, is there an approach they might take that's a healthier approach to help them out?
Yeah, well, like social media, first of all, it's a highlight reel. And like, so all you have to ask yourself, like, what does that individual do, or what does he or she have to do in order to maintain that body fat level? Like for me last year, this was, relentless fat loss phase of, God, 15 weeks plus, but it was like everything was dialed into a T, like 15K steps, cardio, strength training, like every single day. So the amount of hours you're putting in a week for that, I love the three WWW questions. What do you want to do? What are you willing to do? What won't you do? And if you have that, body dysmorphia and you're looking at that individual, but then if you were told that, okay, if you want to get there, Susan, are you willing to train 7 days a week? Are you willing to walk 15K steps? Are you willing to do, 6 strength sessions and 5 cardio sessions per week? And if that's something you're willing to do, you know what, you might get there down the line. But for a lot of people, when you actually understand the trade-off, not to mention your energy levels being on the floor, like often it's actually, you probably don't want to get to that place. So that's what I would say there. It's like just really social media can be a highlight reel. And also you have to understand like the way lighting is going now, and like you see people and literally it's like the lighting in a hotel gym or they optimize everything. Like you can look very, very good and deceptively good just for like one photo, but you don't always look like that. So they're just some ways that I would say, like, what's that individual have to do to maintain that shape and that physique?
Yeah. And it is incredibly, I guess it's scary how the algorithms are designed so well to push you down a rabbit hole more and more in that direction. As soon as you even tap on an image in Instagram and look at it for so many seconds, the algorithm has said, okay, engagement is high. I'm going to show you more like that and even more extreme versions of that and just keep you hooked on the thing. So just people remember, this is like the extreme of the extreme. It's not reality.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not to be said there's anything wrong with like, striving to becoming the best version of yourself, but you run your own race. Don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 5, because also it could just be that like that individual's been training for 10 years longer than you. And sometimes, for someone listening to this, you're like, God, am I seeing results? Sometimes I would have fallen into this bracket, but you just have to, you might be doing anything wrong. You just need to expand the time frame, give yourself a bit more of a runway. And like over time, you can, optimize your performance, your physique and how you look. But, you just focus on yourself. That's what I find works best. And also one other thing with this, and this is huge in Dubai, Philip, and we got to be real here, like TRT, testosterone, steroids. In the gym that I train in, I would say nearly 90% of people are using some form of, optimization there. So it's not even a level playing field anymore, and you don't know what anyone is doing on social media. So again, no need to compare. You just focus on yourself and run your own race.
Awesome. So speaking and focusing on yourself, do you have any advice for people who are not focusing on themselves at the moment and are concerned with whether it's their body image, skinny fat, even to the level of dysmorphia? Maybe they've had a history of that. Like what's one piece of advice you'd give them today? Maybe it's a little bit of psychology or mindset. Maybe it's a specific tip to get started.
Just what I was saying, focus on your performance rather than focus on how your body can perform rather than how you can look. And set a performance-based goal that it's going to stretch you. And it could just be a case you do 10 bodyweight chin-ups. It could be a case that you do a deadlift, double your body weight. But just focus on those kind of goals, and that way you're going to start loving the process of just working out more. And that's the ultimate goal with this. Like fitness, it's not a finite game. There's not a winner or a loser. It's an infinite game, and the goal should be to keep on playing every single day. And I think a good way of doing that is like just setting yourself goals that's going to get you up in the morning, that get you excited about your workouts, and something you can work towards. And if that is a challenge of yours, speak to coaches like Philip, and he can, I'm sure, guide you in the right direction in terms of like what to follow, what to focus on. And sometimes you just need a second opinion to get out of your own head. And also understand these thoughts are normal. Like I myself would have gone through them. I know a lot of other coaches as well who would have had some other similar challenges. So don't feel you're alone in this situation. And sometimes it might just be a case of reaching out and speaking to an individual and, maybe get them to outsource some of your programs, some of your training for you. So you're not always stuck in your own head.
Oh, love that. These thoughts are definitely normal. You are not alone. Seek help. There's help that comes in so many ways. Don't think you have to hire a one-on-one coach. There are many, many ways to do it, from the podcast to group communities to group programs to one-on-one to all sorts of ways to get help. And you're not alone. Pick something that can stretch you, focus on the process, and then you're going to start to love the process. And that's how the results come. Very exciting, man.
100%.
I want to ask you this. I do ask it of all guests. What did you wish I had asked that we didn't cover? And what is your answer?
Yeah, great question. I was thinking about this earlier on. what fuels you and keeps you going?
Go ahead. What fuels you and keeps you going besides food?
Yeah. So I think the big thing for me is just progression, like just growth, improvement. Like even if it's a case that I knock 5 seconds off my 5K run, or you add on a 1.25 kilogram or a 2.5 pound plate to your deadlift, like some form of progression. I'll always finish every workout on some form of a high. So it doesn't even have to be adding more weight to the bar, but it could just be I got 15 chin-ups last week, I got 15 this week, but then I did 15 plus one. And it's one more than I did last week. And, that's that compounding effect again. So for me, in all areas of my life, once I'm seeing that I'm not stagnant, if I'm somewhat improving and growing, that's what really fuels me and keeps me going.
And that's the epitome of a growth mindset right there. Knowing that you can improve, you can do it in all areas. You might have setbacks like you did last year, but even those teach you to grow. I know you talk about happiness a lot on your show, or it's one of the last questions, I think, on your show sometimes. I was recently studying positive psychology. There's a framework in there called the PERMA model, and PERMA stands for 5 things that are associated with well-being and happiness. The A is accomplishment, which is what you're talking about. And then the E in there is engagement, which is like the process and being in flow and being totally into what you're doing. You take those combined with some relationships and meaning and positivity, and man, you got a recipe for success.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Isn't that what Naval said? What you want to do, where you want to live, who you want to spend your time with. Like if you figure out those 3 things, happy with what you're doing, happy with where you live, and you've got good, relationships with people around you. Like for me, that's my fuel. That's my success or happiness formula. Very simple, but it's often the small things that actually don't turn out to be the small things.
And on that inspiring note, my man, where can listeners learn more about you, find your work, look you up?
Yeah, Philip, well, I really appreciate you bringing me on, and really enjoyed this episode also. And for any listeners who want to learn more about me, you can just pop me a follow or check out my content on Instagram. So on Instagram, I'm Adrian McDonnell, and my handle is @Mac Lifestyle Fitness. So that's MC Lifestyle Fitness on Instagram. And Philip, thanks again for having me on. I really appreciate it, brother.
It was so awesome. We got to be blessed with all of your wisdom. So thank you so much for coming on.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Wits and Weights. If you found value in today's episode and know someone else who's looking to level up their wits or weights, please take a moment to share this episode with them. And make sure to hit the follow button in your podcast platform right now to catch the next episode. Until then, stay strong. Hey, before you go, I want to let you know about a free resource I have. They are free guides on everything from fat loss to eating out to building muscle to managing hunger to figuring out the best macros for you and more being added all the time. You want to get the most out of these podcasts and your time to look and feel your best, and these free guides will give you a quick and easy way to know what to do. If you want to get your hands on these completely free guides, you can head over to witsandweights.com/free. That's witsandweights.com/free to get your free guides and level up your results today.